The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky ground of Haven 7 as Dr. Kang. Minho stepped outside the settlement's main gate. The air was thin here, requiring every human to wear breathing masks when venturing beyond the protected dome. But Minho had grown used to the weight of the mask over his nose and mouth. After 6 months on this frontier world, it felt as natural as wearing shoes. Haven 7 was not a kind planet. The soil was hard and rocky, making it difficult to grow food. The weather changed without warning, bringing fierce storms that could last for days. Wild animals roamed the lands beyond the settlement, most of them unknown to the human colonists who had arrived here to build a new home. Minho was a xenobiologist, which meant he studied alien life forms. His job was to catalog every living thing on Haven 7, from the smallest insects to the largest predators. The Colonial Council needed to know what was safe and what was dangerous before they could expand the settlement. As he walked along the perimeter fence, Minho noticed something odd in the red dirt. There were tracks, but they were unlike any he had seen before. They were large, about the size of his hand, with clear claw marks. But what made them strange was their pattern. Most four-legged animals left tracks in pairs, but these tracks showed 6 distinct paw prints. Minho knelt down and took photos of the tracks with his scanner. The device would analyze the prints and compare them to the database of known species. While he waited for the results, he followed the trail with his eyes. The tracks led away from the settlement, heading toward a range of low hills about 2 kilometers away. The scanner beeped. No match found. These tracks belonged to a species that had never been catalogued. Myth felt a familiar excitement in his chest. This was why he had come to Haven 7. Earth had been mapped and studied for centuries. But here on this distant world, there were still mysteries to solve. He gathered his equipment and began following the tracks. The trail led him through a landscape of red rocks and sparse vegetation. The plants here were tough and thorny, adapted to the harsh conditions. As he climbed higher into the hills, the air grew even thinner. Minho had to stop several times to catch his breath. The tracks were fresh, probably made within the last day. Whatever had made them was large and moved with purpose. The stride was long and confident, suggesting a predator rather than prey. Minho kept his hand near the emergency beacon on his belt. If he encountered something dangerous, he could call for help from the settlement. After an hour of walking, the tracks led him to a series of caves carved into the hillside. The openings were dark and uninviting. Minho hesitated. Going into an unknown cave alone was against safety protocols. But the tracks led directly inside, and his scientific curiosity was stronger than his fear. He switched on his helmet light and stepped into the first cave. The walls were smooth, worn by centuries of wind and water. The air inside was cooler and had a strange smell. It's like wet fur and something else he could not identify. The tracks continued deeper into the cave system. Minho followed them carefully, marking his path with small electronic markers so he could find his way back. The cave twisted and turned, leading him deeper underground. Then he heard it. A sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was not quite a growl, not quite a whine. It sounded almost like crying, but with a musical quality that made his skin prickle. The sound came from somewhere ahead, echoing off the cave walls. Minho moved forward slowly. His light beams swept across the cave floor, following the tracks. The sound came again, closer now. It was definitely a distress call of some kind. The cave opened into a larger chamber. Minho stopped at the entrance and swept his light across. The space at first, he saw nothing but more rock and shadows. Then his light caught something that made him freeze. In the far corner of the chamber lay a creature unlike anything in his database. It was large, about the size of a small horse, but built like a wolf. Its fur was dark gray with strange markings that seemed to glow faintly in the beam of his light. Most remarkably, it had 6 legs, just as the tracks had suggested. The creature was clearly pregnant, its sides were swollen, and it lay awkwardly on the cave floor. As Minho watched, he realized the creature was in distress. Its breathing was labored, and its eyes were half closed with exhaustion. But what struck him most was the intelligence in those eyes. When the creature noticed his light, it lifted its head and looked directly at him. There was no fear in its gaze, no aggression. Instead, there was something that looked almost like hope. Minho stepped back, his heart racing. First contact with an intelligent alien species was supposed to happen under controlled conditions, with a full team of specialists and proper protocols. He was not prepared for this. The creature made the sound again, that musical crying that had drawn him here. But this time, Minho heard something different in it. It was not random noise. There was a pattern, a rhythm that suggested meaning. The creature was trying to communicate. Minho lowered his light so it would not blind the animal. He remained still, watching and listening. The creature continued to make soft sounds, always with the same musical quality. Its bioluminescent markings pulsed faintly. In rhythm with its breathing, after several minutes of observation, Minho noticed something that made his blood run cold. Around the creature were the remains of food, but they were old and spoiled. There was no fresh water in the cave. The creature had been here for days, maybe weeks. Slowly starving, it had been abandoned. Minho thought about the tracks he had followed. They had been made by only one animal, not a pack. This creature had come here alone, or had been left here alone. Either way, it was dying. He activated his recorder and began documenting what he saw. The creature watched him work, its intelligent eyes following his movements. When he spoke into the recorder describing the creature's appearance and condition, it tilted its head as if listening to his words. The creature made another sound, softer this time. It was not the crying call he had heard before. This was different, more complex. It almost sounded like language. Minho realized he was facing a decision that would change everything. He could leave the creature here to die and report his findings to the Colonial Council. That would be the safe choice, the proper procedure. Or he could do something that might save its life, even though it would mean breaking every protocol in the book. He looked into the creature's eyes again and saw something that made his choice for him. He saw understanding. This was not just an animal. This was a person, trapped in a form humans did not recognize, and she was asking for help. Minho made his decision. He would not let her die alone in this cave. Whatever the consequences, he would find a way to help her. The creature seemed to sense his decision. Her bioluminescent markings grew brighter, and she made a soft sound that might have been gratitude. As Minho prepared to leave the cave and return to the settlement, he realized that this moment would mark the beginning of something unprecedented in human history. First contact had not happened the way anyone had planned. It had happened with compassion. 3 days had passed since Minho first discovered the creature in the cave. He had returned twice, bringing water and protein bars from his personal supply. The creature had accepted both offerings, though she watched him carefully with those intelligent eyes. Back at the settlement, Minho found himself unable to concentrate on his regular duties. The image of the pregnant creature alone in that dark cave haunted him. He had recorded hours of her vocalizations, but he needed help to understand what they meant. That help came in the form of Park Soo-ben, the settlement's communications specialist. She had arrived on the last supply ship from Earth, bringing with her the latest language analysis equipment and a reputation for being able to decode even the most complex patterns. Soo-ben was young, perhaps 25, with short black hair and curious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had volunteered for the Haven 7 assignment because she believed that humanity's future lay in learning to communicate with alien species. So far, that future had seemed far away. Minho found her in the communications center, surrounded by screens showing signal patterns from the settlement's various monitoring stations. She looked up when he entered, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Dr. Kong, right? The xenobiologist? I heard you've been making extended trips outside the perimeter. Find anything interesting?" Minho hesitated. He had not yet reported his discovery to the Colonial Council. Part of him wanted to keep the creature secret until he understood more about her situation. But he needed help, and Soo-ben might be the only person who could provide it. "I need to show you something," he said, "but it has to stay between us for now." Soo-ben raised an eyebrow. "That sounds mysterious." "It is against regulations." but I think you'll understand why when you see what I found. Minho connected his recorder to Saben's analysis equipment and played the first recording he had made in the cave. The creature's musical vocalizations filled the small room, rising and falling in complex patterns. Saben's eyes widened. She leaned forward, her fingers dancing over the controls as she analyzed the sound patterns. "This is not animal noise," she said after a few minutes. "There's too much structure, too much variation. It's language. That's what I thought. But there's more." Minho played more recordings, showing how the creature's vocalizations changed over time. Some were clearly distress calls. Others seemed more conversational. A few sounded almost like questions. "She's trying to communicate with you," Subin said, her voice filled with excitement. "This is incredible. Where did you find her?" "In a cave system about 2 kilometers from here. She's pregnant and appears to have been abandoned. I think she's dying." Spin's excitement faded. "Dying? Can we help her?" "I don't know. That's why I need your help with the language analysis. If we can understand what she's trying to say, maybe we can figure out how to help her." For the next several hours, Subin worked with the recordings. She broke down the vocalizations into their component parts, looking for patterns and repetitions. What she found was both fascinating and disturbing. "She's definitely trying to communicate," Subin explained, pointing to patterns on her screen. "But there's something else. She's repeating certain sound sequences over and over. It's almost like she's pleading." "Pleading for what?" "I'm not sure yet. But there's another pattern that's even more interesting. She uses one particular sequence constantly. It appears in almost every vocalization, but always in slightly different contexts." Subin played the sequence for Minho. It was a complex series of sounds, musical and haunting. "I think this might be a name. Her name." While Subin worked on the language analysis, news of their activities began to spread through the settlement. Haven 7 was a small community, and secrets were hard to keep. By the end of the week, word had reached the Colonial Council. The council called an emergency meeting. Minho found himself facing 5 stern colonists in the settlement's main meeting room. At the head of the table sat Li Ju-Wu, the colony administrator. A woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. "Dr. Kong," she began, "we've heard some disturbing reports about your recent activities outside the perimeter. Care to explain?" Minho took a deep breath. "I've discovered what appears to be an intelligent alien species. A pregnant female is currently sheltering in a cave system 2 kilometers from here. She's been abandoned by her own kind and is in distress." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Cho Dae-yoon, the settlement's security chief, slammed his hand on the table. "And you didn't report this immediately? Do you have any idea how dangerous this could be?" Dae-jin was a large man with a permanent scowl and the attitude of someone who saw threats everywhere. He had been against establishing Haven 7 from the beginning, believing that humans should stick to worlds without native life. "The creature poses no threat," Minho said. "She's weak, pregnant, and alone. If anything, she needs our help." "You don't know that," Daeon argued. "It could be a trap. This creature could be the scout for a larger force. We should eliminate the threat before it becomes a problem." "She's not a threat," Minho insisted. "She's trying to communicate. With Ms. Park's help, we might be able to establish meaningful contact." Li Ju-Wu held up her hand for silence.
Ms. Park, what's your assessment?"
Subin stood up, her hands trembling slightly. "The vocalizations definitely show language patterns, complex ones." Then we're dealing with first contact. The protocols for that situation are very clear. "Yes," agreed Dr. Kim Young-ho, the settlement's chief scientist. "First contact protocols require careful study and gradual introduction. We can't just approach an alien species without proper preparation. We also can't let it die while we're preparing," Minho said. "She's been without food for days. If we don't act soon, there won't be anything left to study." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. If this was indeed first contact with an intelligent species, then every decision they made would set the precedent for future interactions. "I propose a compromise," said Li Jiu finally. "Dr. Kang, you may continue your observations, but only with proper backup. Ms. Park, you'll accompany him to continue the language analysis. Mr. Cho, you'll provide security support but will not engage unless there's a clear threat." Daeyeon's scowl deepened. "This is a mistake. We're putting the entire settlement at risk for one animal." "She's not an animal," Minho said firmly. "She's a person. She's asking for help." "You don't know that?" Daeyeon replied. "You're anthropomorphizing random sounds." "For all we know, those vocalizations are just the noise a dying animal makes." But Subin shook her head. "I've been analyzing the patterns for 3 days. There's too much structure, too much variation, and there's something else. The sequence. We think is her name appears most frequently when she's alone. It's like she's repeating it to herself, trying to hold on to her identity." "Why would she do that?" asked Dr. Kim. "I don't know," Subin admitted, "but if I had to guess, I'd say it's because she's been rejected by her own kind. It's cut off from her society. Maybe in her culture, forgetting your name means losing yourself completely." The meeting ended with a compromise that satisfied no one. Minho would be allowed to continue his observations, but under strict supervision. Any sign of aggressive behavior would result in immediate action. As the council members filed out, Minho felt a sense of urgency building inside him. The creature was running out of time. Her bioluminescent markings were growing dimmer each day, and her vocalizations were becoming weaker. Whatever her story was, whatever had led to her abandonment, Minho was determined to help her. He just hoped they could figure out how to communicate before it was too late. That night, as he lay in his bunk, listening to the recorded vocalizations through his headphones, Minho made a decision. Tomorrow, he would try something different. Instead of just listening and recording, he would try to respond. He would attempt to speak back to her. The thought both excited and terrified him. He was about to cross a line that no human had crossed before. He was about to have a conversation with an alien. The next morning, Minho and Subin prepared for their most important visit to the cave. Subin had spent the entire night analyzing the creature's vocalizations, and what she had discovered changed everything. "I was wrong about it being just a name," Subin said as they walked toward the hills. Her voice was filled with excitement and nervousness. "It's more than that. The sound pattern she keeps repeating is incredibly complex. It has layers of meaning." Minho adjusted his pack, which contained more supplies than usual. He'd brought fresh water, protein bars, and medical supplies. "What kind of meaning?" "In human cultures, names are just labels. But some Earth cultures believe names have power, that they contain a person's essence. I think her culture might be similar, but even more complex." They climbed the rocky path. In silence for a while. The morning sun was already hot, and the thin air made the climb difficult. But both of them felt the urgency of their mission. According to Minho's observations, the creature was getting weaker each day. "There's something else," Subin continued, as they reached the cave entrance. "I've been comparing her vocalizations to known language patterns. The complexity suggests her species has been using language for thousands of years. This isn't primitive communication, this is sophisticated." They entered the cave system, following the markers Minho had left on previous visits. The familiar smell of wet fur and something else filled the air. As they moved deeper, they could hear the creature's soft vocalizations echoing off the cave walls. When they reached the main chamber, Minho was shocked by what he saw. The creature was noticeably thinner than she had been 3 days earlier. Her bioluminescent markings were so dim they were barely visible. She lay on her side, breathing, slowly and heavily, but when she saw them, her eyes brightened. She lifted her head with obvious effort and made a series of soft sounds. Subin immediately began recording. "She's greeting us," Subin whispered. "I'm sure of it. Listen to the tone, the rhythm. She's saying hello." Minho knelt down and carefully placed water and food near the creature. She drank eagerly, but barely touched the food. Her pregnancy was clearly making it difficult for her to eat. As they watched, the creature began making the complex sound pattern that Subin had identified. It went on for nearly a minute, with variations and repetitions that seemed to follow a specific structure. "She's telling us her name," Subin said softly. "The full version, not just the shortened form she uses when she's alone." Subin played back the recording and began breaking it down into its component parts. What she found was remarkable. The name had multiple layers of meaning, each part describing different aspects of the creature's identity. "The first part seems to mean star or light," Subin explained. "The second part is harder to translate, but it's something like one who walks or traveler. The third part is the most complex. It describes someone who moves between worlds or places. So her name means something like star, who walks between worlds," Minho said. "Valthera," Subin said, trying to pronounce the name as accurately as possible. I think that's as close as human vocal cords can get to the actual sound." The creature's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Her bioluminescent markings flared to life, brighter than either human had ever seen them. She lifted her head higher and looked directly at Subin with what could only be described as surprise and joy. "She understands," Minho breathed. "She knows. We're trying to say her name." Then something unexpected happened. Valthara began making new sounds, more urgent and complex than anything they had heard before. Her markings pulsed in rhythm with her vocalizations, and her body language showed signs of distress. "She's trying to tell us something important," Subin said, frantically recording everything. "But it's too fast, too complex. I can't keep up." Minho watched Valthera's eyes and saw something that made his heart race. She was not just trying to communicate information, she was trying to warn them about something. Over the next hour, they worked together to understand what Valthera was trying to tell them. Gradually, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Through careful listening and patience, they learned that Valthara had not been abandoned randomly. She had been cast out by her own pack for a specific reason. "She's carrying hybrid offspring," Subin said, her voice filled with shock. "The father of her children is not from her own species. In her culture, this is forbidden." The revelation explained everything: Valthera's complex name, her intelligence, her knowledge of language and communication. She was not just any member of her species. She was educated, possibly even important in her society. But she had broken a fundamental law. She fell in love with someone from another species, Minho said quietly. "And now she's paying the price." Valthara continued her story, and what they learned next was even more disturbing. According to her culture's beliefs, such children would possess abilities that could change the balance of power on Haven 7. "Her own people tried to kill her," Subin said, her voice shaking. "They drove her away from the pack and left her to die rather than let her children be born." But there was more. Valthera's vocalizations became more urgent as she explained that her situation was not just about cultural taboos. Her children represented something new, something that neither species had seen before. They would be able to survive in conditions that would kill others of their kind. "She's not just carrying hybrids," Minho realized. "She's carrying the next step in evolution for both species." The implications were staggering. If Valthera's children survived, they would be living proof that different species could not only coexist, but could create something new together. For a culture that feared change, this was the ultimate threat. As they prepared to leave the cave, Valthara did something that surprised them both. She struggled to her feet despite her weakness and approached Minho. She lowered her head and made a series of soft sounds that were clearly directed at him personally. "What's she doing?" Minho asked. Subin listened carefully. "I think she's thanking you, but there's something else." Valthara continued her vocalization, and gradually its meaning became clear. She was asking Minho to speak her name. Not just any attempt at pronunciation, but her true name, spoken with understanding and respect. "She needs to hear her name spoken by someone who knows what it means," Subin said. "It means you're forgotten, erased from existence." Minho felt the weight of the moment. This was not just about pronunciation. This was about recognition, about acknowledging that Valthara was a person with value and dignity, regardless of what her own people thought. He knelt down in front of her, looking into her intelligent eyes. Taking a deep breath, he spoke as clearly as he could. Velthera, star who walks between worlds. The effect was immediate and profound. Velthera's bioluminescent markings blazed with light, brighter than the sun. She lifted her head high and made a sound that was pure joy, pure relief. For the first time since they had found her, she seemed truly alive. But more than that, something had changed in her eyes. The hopelessness was gone, replaced by something that looked like determination. She had been acknowledged, recognized, as a person worthy of respect. As they left the cave, Minho realized that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in human history. They had not just communicated with an alien species. They had performed a ceremony of recognition. Both humans knew that their troubles were just beginning. When the Colonial Council learned what they had discovered, the reaction would be swift and probably hostile. They had just made first contact with an intelligent alien species, and that species was carrying children that could change the future of Haven 7 forever. The question was, would humanity be ready for that change? The news of Velthara's true situation spread through the settlement like wildfire. Within hours of Minho and Sabin's return, the entire colony was buzzing with rumors and speculation. Some called her a miracle of first contact. Others whispered that she was a dangerous hybrid maker who would bring destruction to Haven-7. Dr. Kim Young-ho called an emergency meeting of the Science Council. The small group gathered in the research lab, their faces serious and concerned. Minho and Su-Ben presented their findings, showing the language analysis and explaining what they had learned about Velthera's exile. "If what you're saying is true," Dr. Kim said slowly, "then we're dealing with something far more complex than simple first contact. We're dealing with an interspecies refugee crisis." "She's not a refugee," Cho Daeyan interrupted, bursting into the meeting uninvited. "She's a threat. Her own people cast her out for good reason. Why should we trust something that even her own kind rejected?" Minho stood up, his patience finally exhausted. "Because she's a person, not a thing. And because she's taught us more about Haven 7 in 3 days than we learned in 6 months of surveys." This was true. Since speaking her name, Velthara had become more communicative. She had begun sharing information about the planet's ecosystem, warning them about seasonal changes they hadn't predicted, and showing them safe paths through dangerous terrain. "She's been trying to help us," Su-Ben added. "Every time we visit, she gives us new information. She knows this planet better than we do." "Of course she does," Daeyan said. "She's been watching us, studying us, learning our weaknesses." Entered the room, looking tired and stressed. "I've been in contact with Earth Command. They're sending a xenobiology team, but they won't arrive for 3 months. Until then, we have to make our own decisions." "What did you tell them?"
Dr. Kim
asked. "I told them we had made contact with an intelligent species. I didn't mention the hybrid situation. I wanted to get more information first." Over the following days, a routine developed. Minho and Su-Ben would visit Velthara each morning, bringing supplies and continuing their language exchanges. With each visit, communication became easier and more detailed. Velthara was indeed highly educated in what humans would call xenobiology. She understood the complex relationships between different species on Haven 7, knowledge that proved invaluable to the human colonists. She warned them about underground water sources that would flood during the rainy season, showed them which plants were safe to eat, and explained the migration patterns of the planet's larger predators. But more importantly, she began to trust them. She shared stories of her life before the exile, painting a picture of a complex society with rich traditions and deep-rooted fears about change. "Her people are called the Keth," Su-Ben explained during one of their reports to the council. "They've lived on Haven 7 for thousands of years, but they've never encountered other intelligent species before. When they met the Thymar, the Father's people, it challenged everything they believed about their place in the world." "And the hybrid children?" Dr. Kim asked. "They're not just a mixing of 2 species," Minho said. "According to Velthara, they'll have abilities that neither parent species possesses. They'll be able to adapt to different environments, survive in conditions that would kill others." "That sounds like an advantage," Li Gu said. "To us, yes. But to the Keth, it represents the end of their pure bloodline. They believe it will make them weak, dependent on hybrid children for survival." The settlement remained divided. Some colonists, led by Dr. Kim and the science team, saw Valthara as a valuable ally and teacher. Others, following Dayan's lead, viewed her as a dangerous unknown that should be eliminated before she could cause problems. But as the days passed, even the skeptics had to admit that Valthara's knowledge was keeping them alive. When a severe storm system approached the settlement, she warned them 3 days in advance, giving them time to prepare. When a pack of predators began stalking the perimeter, she taught them how to create deterrent scents that would keep the animals away. She's not trying to harm us, Minho argued during yet another heated council meeting. She's trying to help us survive on her world. Her world, Dayan snapped. This is a human colony now. We don't need permission from some cast-out alien to live here. But we do need to coexist, Subin said quietly. Haven 7 isn't empty. There are intelligent species here, and they have just as much right to this planet as we do. As Valthara's pregnancy progressed, her condition became more critical. She was now in her final weeks, and the stress of carrying hybrid offspring was taking its toll. Her bioluminescent markings had become erratic, sometimes flaring bright, sometimes fading to almost nothing. She's scared, Subin observed during one of their visits. It's not just about the birth, but about what will happen to her children. It knows they'll be rejected by both species. Not by us, Minho said firmly. We'll protect them. Valthara seemed to understand their promise. She began teaching them about the care and feeding of her species' young, preparing them for what was to come. She also shared something else, the location of her mate. Kale is still alive, she told them through the complex mix of sounds and gestures they had learned to interpret. He waits in the deep valleys, hiding from both our peoples. He believes I am dead. The revelation that there was another intelligent alien on Haven 7 sent shockwaves through the settlement. Some wanted to find him immediately. Others feared. It was a trap. But Valthara's message was clear. She wanted her mate to know that she and their children were safe. This changes everything, Ligu said during an emergency council session. If there are more of them out there, we need to know about it. Or we need to eliminate the threat before it grows, Dayan said grimly. But Minho and Subin had a different idea. They proposed something that had never been attempted in human history. A formal diplomatic contact between species. They would bring Kale to the settlement, not as a prisoner or a threat, but as a representative of his people. You're insane, Dayan said. You want to invite aliens into our settlement? We want to build a bridge, Subin replied. Valthara has shown us that coexistence is possible. Her children will be living proof that different species can create something new together. As they debated, Valtharas's condition continued to deteriorate. Her time was running out, and with it, the chance to create a peaceful future for all the species of Haven-7, the decision they made in the coming days, would determine not just the fate of Valthara and her children, but the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. And as Minho watched Valthara struggle with her pregnancy, he realized that sometimes the most important moments in history happen not in grand halls or battlefields, but in quiet caves where one person decides to trust another, regardless of what species they belong to. The bond between human and alien had been forged. Now, it was time to see if it was strong enough to change the world. The storm hit Haven 7 with a fury that no one had expected. The weather monitoring systems had predicted a normal seasonal storm, but what arrived was something far more dangerous. Hurricane-force winds battered the settlement's protective dome, and lightning strikes came so frequently that the night sky looked like daylight in the communications center. Alarms were blaring. Power fluctuations caused by the storm were overloading the settlement's electrical systems. Subin worked frantically at her control panel, trying to maintain contact with the outside monitoring stations. We're losing power to the eastern sector. She called out over the noise of the storm. The backup generators can't handle the load. Minho was supposed to be helping with the emergency response, but his thoughts were with Valthara. The cave where she sheltered was exposed to the worst of the storm, and she was now in the final days of her pregnancy. I have to check on her, he told Subin during a brief break in the emergency repairs. You can't go out in this storm, she replied, not looking up from her instruments. The winds are too strong. You'd be killed before you got halfway to the caves. But as the hours passed, Minho's worry grew. Valthara had been showing signs of distress for days, and the stress of the storm could trigger early labor if she gave birth alone in that cave. Both she and her children might die. The decision was made for him when one of the settlement's power conduits exploded, sending sparks flying across the main plaza. The backup power systems were failing, and without them, the settlement's life support would shut down within hours. "We need to reroute power from the emergency reserves," Li Jiwu announced to the emergency response team. "But someone needs to manually reset the connections at the source." The power source was located in a facility built into the hillside uncomfortably close to Valthara's cave. Minho volunteered immediately. "I'll go," he said. "I know the terrain better than anyone." "Too dangerous," Daeyeon protested. "Send a security team." "We don't have time for a full team," Minho replied. "And I'm the only one who knows the safe routes through that area." What he didn't say was that this would also give him a chance to check on Valthera. Li Jiwu seemed to understand his real motivation, but she approved the mission anyway. "Take communication equipment," she ordered. "If you encounter any alien activity, you are to report it immediately." Minho suited up in the settlement's heaviest weather gear and headed out into the storm. The wind was so strong that he had to crawl for the first 100 meters using guide ropes to prevent being blown away. The rain was like bullets against his protective suit, and the lightning was so bright it hurt his eyes even through his helmet visor. The journey to the power facility took 3 times longer than usual. When he finally reached it, he found that the storm had damaged more than just the connections. The entire facility was flooded, and several critical components were completely destroyed. But as he worked to make emergency repairs, Minho heard something over the howling wind. It was a sound he recognized immediately: Valthera's distress call, but louder and more urgent than he had ever heard it. She was in labor. Minho faced an impossible choice. He could continue working on the power repairs, potentially saving the entire settlement, or he could abandon his mission to help Valthera. But as he listened to her cries echoing through the storm, he realized there might be a third option. 3 weeks earlier, Valthera had shown them something they hadn't understood at the time. She had led them to a series of natural channels, carved into the rock, channels that seemed to follow the electrical patterns of the planet's magnetic field. At the time, they had thought it was just geological curiosity. Now, as he looked at the damaged power systems and listened to Valthara's cries, Minho understood what she had been trying to show them. The natural channels weren't just rock formations. They were part of Haven 7's natural electrical system, a network that could be used to redirect power. Working quickly, Minho began rerouting the settlement's power through the natural channels. It was dangerous and untested, but it was the only way to restore power to the settlement and get to Valthera at the same time as he worked. He could hear her distress calls growing more frequent. She was running out of time, and so was he. The power rerouting worked, but barely. Emergency power flowed back to the settlement through the natural channels, giving them enough electricity to maintain life support. But the system was unstable. It would only last for a few hours. Minok left the power facility and fought his way through the storm to Valthera's cave. What he found there made his heart stop. Valthera was in the final stages of labor, but something was wrong. She was lying on her side, breathing in short, panicked gasps. Her bioluminescent markings were flashing erratically, and she was making sounds of pain, unlike anything he had heard before. But she was not alone. Standing at the entrance to the cave was another figure, similar to Valthera, but smaller and more angular. This had to be Kale, her mate, the father of her children. He had somehow found his way to the cave through the storm. Kale saw Minho and immediately moved into a protective stance, placing himself between the human and his mate, his own bioluminescent. Markings were flashing in patterns that clearly meant warning and threat. Valthara Minho called out, trying to keep his voice calm despite the storm and the tension. "I'm here to help." At the sound of his voice, Valthara lifted her head. She looked at Kale and made a series of sounds that seemed to be explanation or introduction. Kale's threatening posture relaxed slightly, but he remained wary. Over the next hour, Minho found himself assisting in the birth of the first hybrid children in Haven 7's history. Despite the language barrier and the tension between species, he and Kale worked together to help Velthara through the difficult labor. The first pup was born as the storm reached its peak. It was smaller than Minho had expected, but perfectly formed. Its fur was a mixture of its parents' colors, and its bioluminescent markings were already visible, glowing with a soft blue light. But what was most remarkable was its obvious intelligence. Even minutes after birth, the pup was alert and aware, its eyes tracking movement and its ears responding to sounds. The second pup was born 20 minutes later, followed by a third. Each one was unique, showing different combinations of their parents' traits, but all three shared the same alert intelligence and the same adaptive bioluminescent markings. As the storm began to subside, Minho realized that they had witnessed something unprecedented. These weren't just hybrid children, they were the first. A generation of a new kind of being, one that combined the best traits of both species. But their celebration was short-lived. Through the dying storm, they could hear new sounds approaching the cave. Voices, both human and alien, were coming from different directions. The settlement's security team had followed Minho's trail through the storm. At the same time, members of both Velthara's and Kale's species were approaching, drawn by the bioluminescent signals that had accompanied the birth. Within minutes, the cave would be surrounded by representatives of 3 different species, all of whom had reasons to fear or hate each other. The newborn pups, barely an hour old, were about to become the center of a confrontation that could determine the future of Haven-7. As Minho looked at the 3 small creatures nursing at their mother's side, he realized that the real test was just beginning. The children had been born, but now they had to survive in a world where their very existence challenged everything their respective species believed about themselves and each other. The storm outside was ending, but the storm of change was just beginning. The confrontation that Minho had feared began at dawn. As the last of the storm clouds cleared from Haven-7's sky, 3 groups converged on the cave where Velthara had given birth to her children. From the settlement came Cho Dae-yoon and his security team, armed and ready for trouble. From the eastern valleys came a pack of Keth, Velthara's own species, their bioluminescent markings flashing in patterns that clearly indicated anger and disgust. From the western mountains came a group of Thymer, Kale's people. Moving with the fluid grace of natural hunters, Minho found himself in the middle. Standing between the 3 groups in the cave where Velthara rested with her newborn pups, children were less than 12 hours old, but already they showed remarkable development. Their eyes were open, their movements were coordinated, and their bioluminescent markings pulsed with soft, steady light. "Step away from the creatures," Dr. Kang, Daeon ordered, his weapon drawn but not yet aimed. "We're here to assess the threat level. There is no threat," Minho replied firmly. "There's a new mother with her children, and they need protection, not weapons pointed at them." The Keth pack leader, a massive creature with silver-gray fur and scars across his muzzle, stepped forward. His markings flashed in patterns that Minho had learned meant rejection and exile. He was making it clear that Velthara was not welcome among her own people. But Kale moved to stand beside Minho, his own markings flashing in defiance. Though he was smaller than the Keth pack leader, his determination was clear. He would not let anyone harm his mate or his children. The Thymar group remained silent, watching and waiting. Their leader, a sleek female with golden fur, studied the scene with intelligent eyes. Unlike the Keth, she seemed more curious than hostile. "This is a mess," Daeon muttered into his communicator. "We have multiple alien species, hybrid offspring, and a potential 3-way conflict, requesting immediate backup." "No," Minho said firmly. "This is not a conflict. This is a birth. And these children represent the future of Haven-7. The Keth pack leader snarled and took another step forward. His meaning was clear. The hybrid children were abominations that should not be allowed to live. But then something unexpected happened. Velthara, despite her exhaustion from the birth, struggled to her feet. She moved protectively over her pups and began to vocalize in a way that none of them had heard before. What is she doing? Dayan asked. Sebin's voice crackled through. Minho's communicator. She had been monitoring the situation from the settlement. She's speaking the formal language, Subin said. The one used for official ceremonies and important declarations. Valthera's vocalizations continued, growing stronger and more complex. She was addressing each group in turn, speaking in their formal languages. To the Keth, she spoke of change and evolution. To the Thymar, she spoke of unity and cooperation. To the humans, she spoke of friendship and mutual survival. But most importantly, she spoke the names of her children. The first pup, a male with predominantly Keth features, but Thymar grace, she named Corvain, meaning bridge between worlds. The second pup, a female with mixed characteristics, she named Thyval, meaning unity of stars. The third, the smallest but most alert, she named Nethes, meaning new path. As she spoke each name, something remarkable happened. The pups' bioluminescent markings flared to life, responding to their names with patterns that incorporated elements from all three species. They were not just hybrids. They were something entirely new. The Thymar leader stepped forward, her golden fur catching the morning light. She listened to Valthara's formal address, and then responded with vocalizations of her own. Through the translation work that Subin had done, Minho understood the meaning. She was accepting the children as legitimate members of her species. The Keth pack leader, however, remained hostile. His markings flashed in patterns that meant rejection. An exile, then one of the younger Keth, a female with lighter fur, broke from the pack and approached the cave. She stopped just outside the entrance and began to vocalize in the formal language. Her words were directed at Valthera, but her meaning was clear to everyone present. She was asking for permission to see the children. Valthera granted permission. The young Keth female entered the cave. But what happened next would be remembered. As the moment when everything changed on Haven 7, the young female approached the three pups and knelt before them. She studied each one carefully, noting their mixed features and their unique bioluminescent patterns. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She spoke their names, one by one. Pronounced the names that Valthara had given her children: Corvain, Thyval, Nethes. Stronger bioluminescent pulses, as if recognizing the acceptance and recognition in her voice. The effect on the assembled groups was immediate. The act of a Keth speaking the names of hybrid children was a formal acceptance of their right to exist. It broke the deadlock that had held the three species apart, but it was Minho who took the final step that would change everything. He had been studying the formal languages of both alien species, and he realized that this was the moment for humanity to make its own statement. He stepped forward, past the weapons of his own people, past the territorial displays of the alien groups, and approached the cave where Valthera waited with her children. In the formal language that Subin had helped him learn, he addressed not just Valthera, but all the assembled representatives of the three species. He spoke of recognition, of acceptance, of the right of all sentient beings to exist and thrive. Then he knelt before the three pups and spoke their names, not in English, but in the formal languages of their parent species. Corvain, he said, his pronunciation careful and respectful. Thyval, Nethes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. All three pups, bioluminescent markings, blazed with light, creating patterns that none of the assembled adults had ever seen before. The patterns incorporated elements from Keth, Thymar, and even human visual communication systems. The children were not just accepted, they were creating their own language, their own way of communicating that bridged all the species of Haven 7. What happened next would be recorded in the histories of all four species as the founding moment of the Haven 7 Alliance. The Keth pack leader, faced with the formal acceptance of the children by his own pack member, reluctantly withdrew his rejection. The Thymar leader formally invited the human settlement to establish diplomatic relations, and Cho Dae-yoon, witnessing the peaceful resolution of what could have been a violent confrontation, ordered his security team to lower their weapons. But the real victory belonged to the three small pups, who had slept through most of the dramatic events. They were the first generation of a new kind of being, one that would grow up knowing that cooperation between species was not just possible, but necessary. 6 months later, the Haven 7 Alliance was formally established. The human settlement expanded to include areas for both Keth and Thymar residents. Valthera became the first non-human citizen of a human colony, while Kale served as the first ambassador between the three species. The three pups, now growing rapidly and showing remarkable intelligence, became the living symbols of what was possible when different species chose cooperation over conflict. They learned to speak the languages of all three cultures, and they developed new forms of communication that incorporated the best elements of each. Li Jiwu, in her final report to Earth Command, wrote, "The Haven 7 colony has achieved something unprecedented in human history. We have not just made contact with alien intelligence. We have created a new form of civilization based on mutual respect and cooperation between species." But perhaps the most important moment came when Minho, now serving as the Alliance's first xenocultural specialist, was asked by a reporter from Earth what had made the peaceful resolution possible. "It started with a name," he said, looking out over the expanded settlement where humans, Keth, and Thymar worked together to build a better future. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply recognize that someone else exists, that they have value, that they deserve to be known by their true name. "And what about the children?" the reporter asked. "What do they represent?" Minho smiled, watching as young Corvain, Thival, and Nethes played with children from all three species. In the settlement's central plaza, their bioluminescent markings flashed in patterns that created a constantly shifting light show, a visual language that spoke of joy, friendship, and infinite possibility. "They represent the future," he said. "It's not just for Haven 7, but for all of us. They are living proof that our differences don't have to divide us. They can make us stronger." The pregnant extraterrestrial wolf had been left alone to die, rejected by her own kind for loving someone different. But when one human knelt and softly spoke her true name, everything changed. Love, acceptance, and the simple act of recognition had created something new, a family that spanned the stars, a future where being different was not a weakness, but a strength. The new pack had been born, and it included everyone who chose to be part of it.